The boardroom was his battlefield, and he never lost a fight. He built his empire with sharp instincts and an even sharper tongue, turning struggling businesses into powerhouses or crushing them without hesitation. People respected him, feared him, but no one truly knew him. He was ruthless, calculated, and utterly untouchable. Then she walked in. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She was just another deal, another face in a sea of competitors, trying to negotiate with him. But from the moment she met his gaze, something shifted. She wasn't intimidated by his cold demeanor or the way he dismissed people with a single look. Instead, she studied him, saw beyond the headlines, and for reasons he couldn't understand, she refused to back down. At first, he found her persistence irritating. He was used to people bending to his will, agreeing to his terms, and staying within the lines he drew. But she didn't play by his rules. She challenged him in ways no one else dared to, pushing back when he expected silence, questioning him when others only nodded. And worse, she saw through him. Through the carefully crafted mask of power and control, through the distance he kept between himself and the world. He told himself it was a game, just another negotiation, another test of control. But there was something about her, something warm, something real that made him hesitate. He never hesitated. She wasn't trying to change him, and maybe that was the problem. She simply understood him in a way no one else ever had. It was in the way she looked at him, not with fear, not with admiration, but with something else. Something that made him question everything he thought he knew about himself. He had spent years perfecting the art of shutting people out. Business was simple. Emotions were not. And love? That was a word he had erased from his vocabulary a long time ago. So why did he keep thinking about her? Why did her words linger in his mind long after she left the room? Why did it feel like for the first time in his life he was losing control? And more importantly, why wasn't he sure he wanted to stop it? He told himself it was just another late night at the office. Another evening spent staring at reports, analyzing numbers, making decisions that would shape the future of his company. But no matter how many times he looked at the glowing screen in front of him, his mind refused to focus. She had gotten under his skin. It made no sense. He had met thousands of people in his line of work, investors, competitors, CEOs, who prided themselves on being the best. And yet, not a single one of them had ever managed to shake him the way she did. He wasn't even sure how it happened. One moment, she was a potential business partner, another deal to be negotiated, another contract to be signed. The next, she was a presence in his mind, lingering like an unfinished conversation, a question without an answer. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. He didn't like this. The uncertainty, the lack of control. She wasn't supposed to matter, and yet she did. He thought back to their last conversation, the way she had looked at him not with fear, not with admiration, but with something else entirely. Something he wasn't used to, something he couldn't define. She had called him out on his tactics, unafraid to challenge his decisions, and yet she had done it without aggression, without malice. Just understanding. Like she saw right through him, past the walls he had built, past the reputation that preceded him. He hated how much he wanted to talk to her again. He hated how much he wanted to prove her wrong. Or maybe, he hated how much he feared she was right about him. The buzzing of his phone snapped him out of his thoughts. A message from his assistant. A reminder of an upcoming meeting. Another deal waiting to be closed. Another opportunity to bury himself in work, to drown out whatever this was, before it became something real. That was the plan. It had always worked before. But as he shut his laptop and reached for his coat, he couldn't shake the feeling that this time it wouldn't be so easy. The days that followed should have been like any other. Meetings, negotiations, deals lined up one after another. He was used to the rhythm, the predictable flow of business. But something had shifted, and no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, he couldn't shake the feeling that his control was slipping. She wasn't in his office. She wasn't in his meetings. But somehow, she was everywhere. A stray thought in the middle of a conversation. A memory of the way she had looked at him, the way she had spoken to him like she saw past the man, the world knew, and into something deeper. He didn't like it. And yet, he caught himself looking for her, wondering when he might see her again. He told himself it was about business, that she was a variable he needed to account for, that he couldn't afford to be blindsided by someone who thought differently than he did. But the more he justified it, the more it felt like a lie. When they finally crossed paths again, it was by chance. A gala. An event filled with powerful people, all networking, all playing the same game he had mastered. He was there out of obligation. A necessary presence in a room full of competitors, allies, and investors. And then he saw her. She wasn't looking for him. She was in conversation with someone else, her expression thoughtful, her presence effortless. And yet, she felt like the only real thing in the entire room. He watched her, unnoticed at first, studying her the way he studied deals, searching for an angle, a weakness, anything that would explain why she had gotten under his skin. Then she turned. Their eyes met. For a split second, the noise of the room faded. It was just the two of them, suspended in a moment neither of them had expected. She smiled. Not the polite kind, not the rehearsed expression people wore at events like this. Something real. Something he wasn't sure how to respond to. He should have walked away. Instead, he found himself moving toward her, pulled by something he couldn't define. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, when he was close enough to hear her over the music. "Neither did I." His voice was steady, controlled, but he knew she saw past it. "You're staring," she pointed out, amusement in her tone. He exhaled, shaking his head. "You're different." The words were out before he could stop them. She tilted her head slightly, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Different how? He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he had too many. Before he could say anything else, someone interrupted a business partner, pulling him away into another conversation. The moment passed, but the feeling stayed. He spent the rest of the night aware of her, even when they were across the room, even when they weren't speaking. He didn't like distractions. He had built his life on eliminating them. And yet, for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to let this one go. Days passed, but something had shifted. He could feel it. It was in the way his thoughts drifted at the worst possible moments, in the way he caught himself scanning rooms, looking for a presence he wasn't supposed to need. He buried himself in work, pushed forward with new deals, tried to drown out the growing unrest inside him. But the distraction was there, a quiet force lingering beneath the surface. Then came the storm. It started with a deal, one that should have been routine. He had done this 1,000 times before. Negotiations, strategy, power moves. But this time, there was an obstacle. A challenge he hadn't foreseen. Her. He hadn't expected her to be involved. Hadn't thought she'd be standing on the other side of the table, her calm expression betraying nothing as she faced him. It wasn't personal. It was business. He knew that. But the moment their eyes met, he realized this was different. The room was filled with people, all waiting for him to speak. He forced himself to focus, to shut everything else out. He had built his reputation on being unstoppable, untouchable. He wasn't about to let emotions ruin that now. She remained steady, unwavering as she presented her terms. She wasn't reckless, she was precise, deliberate, prepared. And the worst part, he respected it. The conversation shifted, tension building with each exchanged word. The others in the room could feel it too. There was something beneath the surface, something unspoken but impossible to ignore. And then she said something that made the air in the room tighten. You don't have to do this alone. It wasn't part of the deal. It wasn't about the numbers or the terms or the business at all. It was about him. And she knew it. For the first time, he hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Enough for her to see that she had touched a nerve. Enough for him to realize that she had found the one crack in the armor he had spent years perfecting. He couldn't let her win. Not here. Not like this. His voice came out colder than he intended. You don't know me as well as you think you do. Her expression didn't change. But something flickered in her eyes, understanding, maybe even disappointment. She didn't argue. She didn't push. She just nodded, like she already knew how this would end. The meeting continued, but everything felt different. He went through the motions, made his points, fought for control, but his mind was still on her words. On the way, she had looked at him. On the terrifying realization that maybe, just maybe, she was right. And if she was, what did that mean for him? The meeting ended, but the tension didn't. Even as people filed out of the room, shaking hands, exchanging polite words, he felt the weight of something unfinished pressing down on him. He should have been satisfied he had secured what he wanted, maintained control, proven once again that no one could outmaneuver him. And yet, there was no satisfaction. Only the lingering echo of her words. He stayed behind, pretending to review documents, waiting for the room to empty completely. But she didn't leave. You don't have to pretend, she said, her voice calm but firm. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Pretend what? That this doesn't bother you? He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You're overestimating your influence. She studied him for a moment, then took a slow step forward. Am I? Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. He had spent his life controlling situations, dictating outcomes, making sure no one ever had the power to shake him. But right now, with her standing so close, watching him with that unshakable calm, he wasn't sure where he stood anymore. Then, the second blow came. A phone buzzed on the table. His. A name flashed across the screen, one he hadn't seen in years. One that should have been buried in the past. He stared at it, feeling the ground shift beneath him, in a way that had nothing to do with business, nothing to do with her, and everything to do with a part of his life he had worked tirelessly to forget. She saw the change in his expression. Who is it? He didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, he picked up the phone and walked away, leaving her standing there, watching as the walls he had let crack for just a moment slammed shut once again. He stepped into the hallway, gripping the phone tighter than necessary, before answering. A voice from the past. Calm, familiar, but laced with something dangerous. It's been a long time. His jaw tightened. Not long enough. I hear you've been busy. Building your empire. Making enemies. A pause. You should be careful. Some people don't forget. The line went dead. He stood there, pulse pounding, mind racing. She had been right about one thing: he didn't have to do this alone. But now, it was too late. The call lingered in his mind long after it ended. He knew exactly what it meant. The past had found him, and this time it wasn't going to stay buried. He spent the next few days preparing pulling strings, making calls, tightening his grip on every loose end in his business. He told himself it was just another problem to solve, another threat to eliminate. But the truth was, this was different. This wasn't just business. And somehow, she knew. She didn't ask questions when she saw him again, but the look in her eyes told him she wasn't fooled. She could see the tension in his posture, the distraction in his silence. You're shutting me out again, she said quietly. This isn't your problem, he replied, voice controlled but distant. Her expression remained steady. You think that changes anything. He wanted to tell her it had to. That there were things she couldn't fix, things he had to handle on his own. But before he could say anything else, the real storm hit. The attack came at the worst possible moment, an ambush disguised as a business move, a calculated strike from someone who had been watching, waiting for the right time. A deal he thought was secure suddenly crumbled, his company's stock plummeted overnight, and behind it all was the voice from that call. You should be careful. Some people don't forget. It was a warning, but also a challenge, and he knew exactly what he had to do. For the first time, he didn't think about the numbers. He didn't think about his reputation, or the strategy, or the power play. He thought about her. About the way she had stood by him, about the way she had seen him when no one else had. And he realized something that shook him more than any of this. He wasn't afraid of losing his business. He was afraid of losing her. So when she showed up at his office that night, demanding answers, he didn't push her away. He told her everything. The past, the threats, the choices that had led him here. He laid it all out, expecting her to walk away. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at him, steady and unshaken, and simply said, it was in that moment, when he had nothing left to hide, no more defenses to hold up, that he realized she had won. Not in business, not in negotiations, but in something much bigger. She had broken through the walls he thought were unbreakable. And just when he thought the fight was over, the final twist came. Because the person behind the attack, the one who had been pulling the strings from the shadows, was someone he had trusted. He sat in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. Of all the possibilities, of all the enemies he had made over the years, he hadn't expected this. The betrayal cut deeper than he wanted to admit. She was watching him carefully, waiting for his reaction. He could feel her presence beside him, steady and unwavering, but for the first time, he didn't know what to do. He had spent years calculating every move, anticipating every threat. And yet, he had been blind to the one standing closest to him. Who is it? She finally asked, her voice quiet but firm. He exhaled, his jaw tight. Someone I once trusted. There was no need for more words. She understood. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, confrontations, and careful strategy. He didn't let emotion take over, not yet. There was too much at stake. But beneath the surface, he felt something shift. This wasn't just about protecting his business anymore. It was personal. And then, finally, the moment came. Face to face with the person who had orchestrated everything, he waited for an explanation that would never be enough. The betrayal was written in their eyes, but so was something else: justification. As if they truly believed they had a reason. It was never about destroying you, they said, voice eerily calm. It was about making you see what you refused to see. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay in control. And what is that? You built walls so high that even the people who cared about you couldn't reach you. You pushed everyone away, convinced that power and control were the only things that mattered. I did this to prove to you that they're not. He wanted to deny it. Wanted to tell them they were wrong. But deep down, he knew there was truth in their words. And then, for the first time, he let himself feel the weight of it all. Everything he had built, everything he had fought for it, had kept him isolated, locked inside his own creation. But she had been different. She had seen him when no one else had. And now, standing here in the aftermath of everything, he realized that she had been right all along. The confrontation ended not with a dramatic fall, not with revenge, but with something far more powerful. A choice. To let go of the past. To rebuild not just his business, but himself. To stop seeing vulnerability as weakness and start seeing it as strength. As he walked away from the final conversation, she was there waiting for him. He met her gaze, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to put up a front. She smiled, just a little. So, what now? He took a breath, feeling something unfamiliar, but freeing settle inside him. Now we start over. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life never was. But for the first time, it was real. And that was enough.